Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Rabbi.
We're learning Mishna Yevamos, Parakut Aleph, Chapter 11, Mishnah Aleph, Mishnah 1. Okay, so we know that the Torah tells us that when a man marries a woman, many of her relatives become forbidden to him through the fact that they were married, and and most of the time, whether the wife is alive or not, the prohibition to the relative continues, other than her sister. Now, in all these in the typical situation we've been talking about, where a man was married to a woman, and then her relatives become forbidden to him. Our Mishnah is going to deal with a situation where the man did not marry the woman, but he cohabited with her in some form. And the question is, what does that do regarding her relatives? So says the Mishnah, Noisin al anus of alamafuta. One may marry the relatives of the woman that he either violated or seduced. The fact that he just cohabited with her does not create the prohibitions, according to Torah law, does not create the prohibitions that being married to the woman does. Now, what's important to know, though, is that that's according to Torah law. Let me read to you from the bottom here in the notes. The rabbis ever forbade him to marry the relatives of the woman with whom he cohabited as long as she is alive. The reason is that if he married one of her relatives, he would be constantly in contact with her and might be tempted to continue his relationship with her since he's already comfortable with her. But since he married her relative, continuing his former intimacy with her would now violate the biblical prohibition against cohabiting with one's wife's relatives. Thus, our Mishnah, which permits him to marry her relatives, is referring to where she has already died. Meaning, according to rabbinic law, according to Torah law, if you didn't marry the woman, her relatives are permissible. But the rabbi said that if you're already cohabited in any form with a woman, you may not marry any of her relatives as if you were married, because if you land up marrying her relatives, you're going to be hanging around her, and you may, again, give in to temptation and cohabit with her. And now, if you cohabit with her after she's actually married to her relative, if you cohabit with her now after you're actually married to her relative, you're talking about a Torah prohibition. You're talking about an erva. So, for instance, if let's say a person cohabited with a woman, and then the question is he wants to marry her daughter, okay, and he goes and he marries her daughter. Now, if he lands up falling back into the woman that he acted with before, that's a Torah prohibition. You're not allowed to marry your wife's mother. So, therefore, the Rabbanan said even when they didn't marry, all they did was cohabit. The halacha is you cannot marry her. So according to Torah law, a person who happens to a woman, he can marry her relatives. According to rabbinic law, he may not marry her relatives because we're afraid that if he marries her relatives and she's around, he's going to sin with her again. And if he sins with her again, at that point, after he married her relative, you'll now have a situation of erva, of a serious Torah prohibition. That only holds true as long as she is alive. According to Torah law, typically a relative who if you're married to a woman, even after she dies, relative is forbidden. This rabbinic prohibition is going to be besides for her sister, but this rabbinic prohibition only applies as long as that woman that you cohabited with is alive. Then you cannot marry her relatives. When she's not around anymore, the Rabbanan took away the prohibition because it's not the issue at hand. The concern isn't relevant anymore. So therefore, when the Mishnah says the words nosin, which means one may marry, which sounds there's that you're allowed to go ahead and marry, is talking but you can't just go marry if there's a rabbinic prohibition, right? The answer is it's talking about where that woman that you cohabited with originally died. Then you can go ahead and marry her relatives because there's no prohibition on it. Next, however, this is really elementary. If a person violates or seduces the relative of the woman he's married to, he's liable for that. That's talking about an erva. If he married a woman, then he seduced her relative, that's a problem of a relative that's considered the Torah forbids as an erva. He's liable for cohabiting with an erva, with a woman who's forbidden to him through marriage from his wife, and the Torah puts on that a punishment of death for doing so. Okay, next. Naisei Adam Anusas Avimafutas Aviv. A person may marry the woman that his father violated or his father seduced. Anusas Benoi, Mafutas Benoi. or the woman that was violated by his son or was seduced by his son. A person may not marry his father's wife, right? If his father, he comes from one mother, his father remarries. The halacha is his father's wife is an erva. She's absolutely forbidden to marry. Even if the father dies, he can't marry her. Okay? In our case, it's not talking about his wife. It's talking about the woman that he violated, the woman he cohabited with. The same thing. You cannot marry a daughter-in-law. You can't cohabit with your daughter-in-law even after one son passes away. But over here, we're not talking about that was actually a daughter-in-law. It was someone that his son had cohabited with. So the Mishna is saying there is no problem in that case, because since there was no marriage involved with his father or his son, that therefore this woman is not considered is not an erva, and he can marry her. And over here, they bring down here on the bottom, there's not even a rabbinic prohibition for marrying her when you're dealing with the men. Okay. Rabbi Yehuda oiser ba'anusas aviv u'mafutas aviv. Rabbi Yehuda says that if we're talking about the woman that his father violated or seduced, there we say the son cannot marry her. He agrees in the case of the woman that, there we say, right, the son cannot marry her. He agrees in the case of someone whose son cohabited with a woman. Rabbi Yehuda agrees that woman is not forbidden. But the woman that his father cohabited with, whether again he violated her or seduced her, that he may not marry. According to Rabbi Yehuda says he derives from a pasuk. He derives from the wording of a pasuk that when the Torah forbade when a person is forbidden to his father's wife, the Torah includes not only his actual wife, but anybody he cohabited with. But that's a special derivation from the Torah regarding that specific erva of a father's wife or woman he cohabited with. No one else has that kind of source, and therefore, in the situation of where one son cohabited with a woman, that woman would still be permitted to him. Okay. Okay. You see somebody wrong another person. You stole from him. He stole from him. He damaged him. He held back money from him. Whether the person who was affected knows about it or not. You know that he did it. Or he embarrassed him. He insulted him. But you know about this person, this perpetrator, in any form of hurting someone. And you know for sure, and you know he did not return the stolen article, he did not pay for the damage, he did not ask for forgiveness. Even if you see this on your own, you're only one witness to it, you're allowed to tell other people in order to help the person who has been wronged. And to actually degrade this kind of behavior in the eyes of people so that they should not, follow this kind of behavior. They should stay away from this kind of behavior. However, one has to be very careful that he has to have, there are 7 conditions that cannot be missing in order to be able to do this. So I'm going to leave you on edge about what those conditions are. But the point is that you have a situation where somebody wronged someone else, and that person who did the damage in any way has not made up for it. You would be allowed to tell others about it in order to help the person who was hurt, and again to make sure people do not follow that kind of behavior. Have a wonderful day and a wonderful Shabbos.
Thank you, Rabbi.